Well, welcome to another Friday night. We're moving along in our series on understanding trauma and how it affects us. And last time we looked at the fact that trauma causes people to be basically driven by, controlled by fear at this very deep level that they might not even be aware of. Tonight, what I want to look at is you can't understand complex trauma without understanding that it makes angry people. It makes a lot of anger. But most, again, aren't even aware of it. And that's what I'm going to try to explain to you so that you can become aware of it. Because what I've seen is that for many people, when I teach about anger, they go, I don't have any anger issues. The truth is that they've stuffed it down so far they're not even aware of it to themselves. And many, by the time I'm done teaching, they'll come up to me afterwards and say, okay, now I'm angry at you. I've got anger issues. Most will say, I don't have anger issues, but maybe once in a while. My anger kind of flares up. Yeah, I do some damage at my job, with my kids, with my spouse, but otherwise, I'm a pretty cool person. So they don't see those kind of crisis times where their anger escalates as being a super big problem. And so we're going to explore all of that. Another thing that many people don't even realize with their anger is that how much it's been directed at themselves. And they're constantly beating themselves up, putting themselves down. So I really hope tonight helps you become aware of this anger issue in your own life and gives you some practical understanding and practical tools in responding to that. Now let me just begin with kind of understanding the big picture of anger and complex trauma. If you were to talk to somebody that's coming out of complex trauma and ask them about the anger emotion, most of them would immediately just assume that's bad. Because everything in their experience, anger's been a bad thing. It's never been shown, it's never been acted on in a healthy way. It's always hurt somebody. It's always been negative. And so it's just bad. So we got to start by kind of understanding, is there such a thing as healthy anger? What's it look like? What's its purpose? So let me take you to, there is a healthy anger. It does have a very important design. So think of it this way. Whenever there is dishonesty, so somebody lies to you, we get angry. When there's disrespect, somebody puts you down or puts somebody else down, or your kids down, we get angry. Or they cheat on you, or there's injustice, we get angry. And we should. Why? Because that is unhealthy. If we keep lying to each other in this relationship is not going to be healthy. If we keep cheating, if we keep disrespecting, it is going to hurt us, hurt the relationship. So anger is a warning sign, a signal, something is violating love. And what it does is it gives me energy and motivation to want to change that, to get it back to healthy. So what we're saying is, to have a healthy relationship, you live within the boundaries where there is honesty and respect and justice and faithfulness. But we just stepped outside of those boundaries, and we're going to be in trouble if we don't correct it and get back inside of the boundaries. So my anger is motivating me and giving me energy to say, we got to fix this. That is not good. We should not be allowing that. This needs to be resolved. And so anger, physiologically, get even some help in doing that called cortisol. And it gives us a turbocharge of energy to try and correct it. And so it's deep inside of us. We have an alarm system when stuff violates love. And when it does, anger comes in to try to correct it. That is the design. But what happened for most people in complex trauma? They lived every day as a child with things that violated love. They were disrespected. They were lied to. They were cheated on. There wasn't justice. All kinds, hundreds of things. And they got angry as little children. They cried. They complained. They had a temper tantrum. Did that anger result in fixing the problem and getting it back to love? No, in most cases, because the authorities in their life weren't concerned about getting it back to healthy. And so the child got punished for their anger. They got told they're bad for having their anger. And so now they're living with injustice, with lying, with disrespect, all of those things that violate love, which hurt like crazy. But now if they get angry, they'll get hurt even more. They'll get punished, shamed, rejected. And so what is their only option? If you can't resolve the things that violate love, stuff down your anger. And so in some ways, if you want a word picture, you push down all your anger and create this molten lava deep inside of a volcano. But you can't let that anger out because it'll only lead to more pain. And so many stuff it down so far that they're not even aware that it's there. Now some, they find ways to express that anger, to let it out, not at mom and dad, but maybe at kids at school, at their siblings, at animals. They might do things that are vandalism. They might light fires. That's what happens with angry children. It has to come out for some of them. But here's another part that I want you to understand about complex trauma and anger. Do you see that the healthy design of anger is that when love is violated, you get angry, and the pull of anger is, let's get back to love. Let's get back to healthy. Anger has a powerful pull on you to get back to angry, to get back to healthy. What happens, though, in the child where you can't ever resolve anything, where nothing ever gets back to healthy? Anger begins to have the reverse pull. It begins to pull you in a negative direction, not in a positive direction. And so now when you're angry, what do you want to do? Hurt somebody. Isolate. Hurt yourself. Shut down. So anger then has just as much power, but it's pulling you now to a self-destructive, to a relationship-destructive place. And that's, to me, part of the tragedy of complex trauma. So sadly, what happens in that child is there's all this lava underneath the surface constantly, because every day new things that violate love take place that they got to stuff down. And so anger becomes their default setting. They're just angry all the time. Sometimes not even aware of it, but it is there. Others, they actually, when they start to lash out and they get a bit older and they can start to express their anger, they like that feeling of cortisol. And so they get addicted to that anger. And so that can become a big issue for them. But for many, there's an element of that anger that always is turned inward. the shame part of it. It's my fault. I'm bad. I must be doing something wrong. Nobody loves me because I'm not good enough. And so the anger gets turned on themselves. And then every time they perceive that they fail, they got to beat themselves up. And so there's a strong inner critic inside of them. Some even self-harm, but it's anger turned on itself. And that becomes the reality of so many people. So let me ask you some general questions just about your life and your upbringing. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being basically nothing, to 10 being explosive, what was the amount of anger in your family? Now you got to be careful here, because a lot of people say, well, my family never got angry. And I go, okay, whoa. I'm not talking about how it got explosive anger expression. I'm talking about, what did you sense as a child about how angry people were? Rate that on a scale of 1 to 10. And that often is surprising for people. Second one, scale of 1 to 10. Rate the amount of anger in your life in the last 10 years. Third one, scale of 1 to 10. Rate the amount of anger in your life over the last 2 months. And then look at your latest anger experience. What triggered it? Scale of 1 to 10, how intense was it? So those are just some questions that hopefully are helpful. So let's go back to this volcano. So again, people from complex trauma have a huge ocean of lava at the base of that volcano. It's been there for years. It's been added to, but it's there. And it's always simmering below the surface. Once in a while, something will trigger that anger in a special way, and there will be an eruption, an anger event. So there's 2 types of anger. That's what I want you to see. There's the lava anger that's always there. There's the explosion, eruption anger. Now, again, some people often aren't convinced that they have anger issues, because in their mind, when they think of anger events, they only think of huge, violent eruptions, somebody yelling, screaming, throwing stuff. Then you go, there's an angry person, and it's obvious. And that's their whole definition of an angry person, is they have explosion type anger. And that definitely is an anger type. But you realize there's 3 other ways that people express anger. And these might be your ways. Because these other 3, they don't even look like they have an anger issue. They don't even look like there's any anger issues at all. So, number 1 is, like we say, we stuff it. We stuff it so well and so good. As soon as we feel anger, down, we're cool. Meanwhile, we have high blood pressure, can't sleep well, irritable a lot, but we don't have anger issues. So that's the stuffer. Secondly, the turning it on ourselves. So the person who is constantly tearing themselves down in their mind, constantly criticizing themselves, finding fault with themselves, beating themselves up, even hurting themselves. It's like, I need to be punished, so I am going to do that to myself. I'm going to be judge and executioner. And so a lot of people struggle with that. But then the next one is underhanded, and it's an important one to understand. Some people would refer to it as passive aggressive. So this is the sneaky kind of anger, where you're angry, but you don't look like you're angry. You're subtle in how you express it. So just example, a sarcastic person. Oh yeah, they say, yeah, you can't do anything right. And you go, now, do they mean that? Or, because it feels like there's an edge to it. And you go, do you mean that? No, I'm just joking. So you take a shot, but you say it vaguely enough with humor that you can never be pinned down that you're taking a shot. But you hope they got it. So that's one. Some of you have gone through living with a mom or a spouse who, silent treatment. They're punishing you by not talking to you. You try to connect to them, but you just hit this cold, silent wall. And they're not going to talk to you until they're sure they've punished you enough. But if you were to say, are you mad at me? No. Deny it. Because you're not expressing anger, you're just quiet. So that's a underhanded, sneaky, passive-aggressive. Some, they just pout and give you one-word answers. How are you doing today? Fine. You don't sound fine. Are you sure you're okay? Yep. You want to talk about anything? Nope. Okay. Same idea. Others, once you've been married for a while, you get to know what annoys your spouse. And so you're annoyed at them, but you're not going to show it, so you just push their buttons all day. You do things that you know are going to irritate them and get them angry. And then when they get angry at you, you go, whoa, you got an anger issue. You need to look at that. Meanwhile, you're the one with the anger issue. You're just super sneaky about it. So, for a lot of people, they can do all four of these anger styles. So they might start by stuffing it, turning it on themselves. Then they might get a little underhanded, and then it's still building, and finally they explode. Others, they just find a favorite style and get really good at it. And that's just their major go-to whenever they feel angry. But again, I want you to see is that 3/4 of these, there's anger issues there, but you don't see them. They're hidden. They're sneaky. But it's still anger that is driving it. Now, I got to take another step here with complex trauma. So complex trauma, the child begins with healthy anger, but that doesn't lead to anything being resolved. Rather, it leads to them being punished, so they stuff it. But then they learn by watching mom and dad get angry all the time, and it has some positive purposes. So they begin to learn over time unhealthy uses of anger that are self-serving. So, let me give them to you. If I get angry, I intimidate people. And that allows me to maintain control over people. So it's a great tool in being a control freak type person. Others, if I'm angry, then all of a sudden I'm not feeling my sadness or my anxiety. So anger medicates other painful emotions. So as soon as I'm feeling embarrassment or shame or fear, turn it into anger, and then only feel anger, and I won't feel that other stuff. Or, how do I keep people from getting in my space? I don't know how to set healthy boundaries. I don't know how to say no, or please give me space. I'm afraid they won't like me with that. So what's the only way to set a boundary that they have? Either isolate or explode in anger. And when you explode in anger, you drive everybody away because they're afraid of you. The problem with that is it seems to work. It gives you some space, but then typically people feel guilty for driving everybody away with their anger explosion. And so then they just let everybody back in and become a doormat to them until they're so smothered again, they got to explode again. And it starts this kind of yo-yo effect, which is not healthy at all. And then others learn, if I'm angry at somebody, it's a great way to hurt people, to pay them back. It's a great way of revenge. And then for others, when I'm angry, I got that cortisol happening, and that gives me energy. So I like anger because it gives me energy to do my chores. It gives me energy to get my jobs done. So anger becomes my fuel. Or when I'm angry, I'm more on guard. There's an edge to me where I'm not letting anybody too close. I'm checking everybody out. So anger keeps me safe, is what happens. Then, every time I'm angry, it's in my brain, never my fault. It's always somebody else's fault. So anger allows me to blame everybody else. And I feel self-righteous. I feel I'm better than everybody else. That's a positive part to anger. And then some go, I don't ever want to resolve an anger when somebody hurts me, because if I resolve that anger, I might drop my guard and they might hurt me again. So I need to turn that anger into a resentment so that I never drop my guard with that person again and I'll never get hurt. Many people, when it comes to setting boundaries, they don't know how to set a healthy boundary unless they close their heart to the person. That's their only way of being able to enforce a boundary. And so to close their heart to their person, they got to be angry at that person. So anger plays a role there. I've worked with many people that have been that intimidating, angry person as an adult for years, and that got them respect. It wasn't a respect from people that they admired you. It was a respect that they feared you. And they go, well, it's still respect. So their anger, their intimidating presence became their identity. And I've actually had clients say to me, I'm afraid to give up my anger because I'm afraid I won't know who I am. And I don't know if I'll like that person. Next thing, when I'm angry, I'm blaming everybody else. I never have to self-examine very much. I avoid looking too closely at myself. And then when I'm angry, I don't want anybody. I don't need anybody. It makes me feel very independent. And it's my way of convincing myself I don't need anybody. And then the final one. For some people, in their family growing up, the only way anybody got listened to is not when they talked quietly. The only time you got noticed and paid attention to is when you were yelling. And so anger became necessary to be heard, to be taken seriously. And so that still is part of their thinking. Okay, so that's not looking like a pretty picture. Anger is becoming this very much a weapon and a shield for people. That is all unhealthy tools. So what are some of the issues that come out of that if you don't deal with it? Well, for many people, especially those coming out of addiction, every time their anger is triggered, they go to their limbic brain, and what does their limbic brain want to do? Something impulsive. And so a lot of people with addiction issues is, I'm angry, I'm going to go and punish you by relapsing. So it's a huge relapse issue. For many that I deal with, what they realize as they get to understand their anger and become aware of all of this lava that they push down is they go, I think I've been as angry as long as I can remember. I'm just not sure why. And I'm kind of afraid of looking at my anger. I'm afraid of actually letting some anger out. Because I'm afraid if I let a bit of anger out, it's going to come out scary and do a ton of damage. I am afraid of my anger. That's so common. But then for many people, they have so much guilt around their anger. Every time it has come out, it's done a ton of damage to their children, to their partner. They can be a wonderful person 99% of the time, but that 1%, when they get angry, man, the damage it does. And the guilt they feel. But then, when they begin to understand anger, they go, when my anger gets triggered, I go from 0 to 100 in a nanosecond. And what you're telling me to do is I need to, in that nanosecond, stop my anger, which is being fueled by cortisol, and to choose a different set of tools to respond in that nanosecond. This is going to be hard. And I go, yeah, this is going to be super hard. And then they go, okay, if I only got triggered by one or two things, then maybe this would be okay. But I get triggered by hundreds of different things. I get anger triggered multiple times every day. It's a constant thing I have to deal with. And so they begin to realize, yeah, this is going to be difficult. Let me go back to anger being scary. I have a lot of clients that talk to me about a black rage. And so they get so angry that they all go to a place where they don't even remember what happens next. It's just like they black out. And this rage takes over. So that is a scary thing for people. And then, because it pulls in such a powerful way and in a negative direction, if you don't deal with it, it's going to keep taking you to negative places. That's what I want you to see. Anger no longer pulls you, as it should, in a positive direction, only negative. And so you have to stop that and retrain it to pull you in a positive direction again. But if you don't do the work, it'll keep pulling you to a darker place where more and more damage is done. Now I find that, like I said, some get addicted to being angry. Some wake up angry. They're already angry and they go looking for an excuse to justify that anger. They go looking for something that they can say, oh, that makes me angry, and then they can lash out. And so their whole day becomes finding ways to vent their anger, even if they got to make it up. Another issue that comes out of not dealing with your anger is when your anger is triggered and you're in your limbic brain, it is really hard to stick to healthy boundaries, healthy filters. So you might say to your spouse, I'm committing myself to the healthy boundary of always being respectful in my speech to you. What happens when you get angry? Whoa, that boundary? Who cares? I want to say this to you. All the filters disappear and you forget about that respect boundary. And so anger gets you to your limbic brain and it gets you to overstep healthy boundaries in relationships. And it makes you feel better in the moment, but wow, does it make you feel terrible afterwards. And then just, like I said already, healthy anger is still very possible, and is important to allow it in my life and to learn when it's healthy, but then when it crosses a line and becomes unhealthy. That's part of what the journey is. And so for many people, they have healthy anger today, and then they need to learn, what do I need to do to fix this situation, to get back to love, and then I can let it go. And then it's resolved. But for some, the healthy anger stage is past, but they still want to hang on to the anger and turn it into a resentment. And then it goes into unhealthy. And that does a ton of damage. Gabor Mate, who we talk about all the time, has written a book called The Cost of Hidden Stress When the Body Says No. And what he says is, when we have been prevented from learning how to say no, our bodies may end up saying it for us. So his thesis is that repressed anger and stress, both which have cortisol, you push that down, it will result in significant health problems. So they now have evidence that it takes people to Lou Gehrig's disease, ALS, MS, multiple sclerosis, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, Alzheimer's, fibromyalgia, and IBS. 40% of cancer patients have experienced the death of a parent before the age of 19. So repression, he says it this way: dissociating emotions from awareness, relegating them to the unconscious realm, and the result is it disorganizes and confuses our psychological defenses, so that in some people, these defenses go awry, becoming the destroyers of health rather than the protectors. So another way to say that, when we repress our emotions, particularly anger, they now operate in the subconscious, and they put a ton of stress on our bodies that does a ton of damage. So let me come to tools for dealing with anger. We got to deal with the lava, and we got to deal with the eruptions. Most anger management courses just focus on dealing with the eruptions. And what I say is, that doesn't work for people with complex trauma. If they don't have tools to deal with the lava, you can give them tools to deal with the eruptions all day long, and they're eventually not going to work because the lava is going to keep boiling out. So they need to start with tools to deal with the lava. And that is going back, finding the wound that caused the anger, being able to heal that wound and resolve it. Very slowly beginning to be aware of what's caused the lava, healing the lava, reducing that total amount of lava. That is a long journey. It's slow self-awareness. But every time your anger gets triggered, don't just focus on the here and now eruption. Go back to what got triggered. What old wound is there that wasn't responded to as a child, that violated love, that I need to begin to find healing for? So that's part one. So I hope you see that there's not a magic solution to this. This is a lot of hard work. We've done a whole series on this. It's on YouTube. It gives lots of practical tools, and I don't have the time to go through all of them. I just want to give you 3 things to be aware of that hopefully will help you as a starting point in beginning to deal with the anger, with the eruption stuff, and with the lava. So with the eruption stuff, because that's when the most of the damage gets done. In the heat of the moment. Here's the big picture. In the heat of the moment, 0 to 100 nanosecond, You're being asked to respond differently in that nanosecond, to go in a different direction with different tools when you've got one of the most powerful forces in the world pulling you to where you've always gone in the past. So this is not going to be easy. You will probably not succeed the first time, the second time, the third time. But each time you might fail, but learn from the failure. So that next time when you get triggered, in that nanosecond, you have a new tool that you can use that will help. And slowly you begin to acquire tools where you start to respond differently to the nanosecond. Somebody said this: anger, if not restrained, is frequently more hurtful to us than the injury that provokes it. So you start by biting your tongue, and that's really hard to do, especially in that nanosecond. Now that's not pushing it down. That's just saying, oops, I'm in my limbic brain. I need to not react right now because I'll say something I regret. I need to be able to de-escalate and get back to my cortex and resolve it. So the goal is still resolution, is just realizing there's a timeline now, and right now I gotta bite my tongue. So then we do the grounding, the de-escalating. So for some people, grounding, I gotta get by myself and I gotta do some breathing. Deep breathing, that helps calm me down, get me out of my limbic brain. Some people find grounding helpful to bring into, okay, what are my 5 senses picking up right now? That puts me back in the present. That puts me back to feeling. And that is very grounding. Others like to just review facts. What are all the hockey teams of the NHL? What are all the capital cities? And just getting into their cortex, thinking about something else, helps to ground them. Others like a visualization, like a remote control where I'm turning down the volume. Or a stove with a bunch of elements, and one's red hot and the pot's boiling, but I take it off it and put it on a back burner where it's going to be cooling down. All of those are helpful. Second thing, sometimes you just got to get out of the situation and go for a walk. If you stay in the situation, you just keep getting triggered, and you can't control it. You need to take a break. Some, when they take a break, they need that time to process alone before they come back to try to resolve it. So they need to write some stuff down. So journaling, point form, whatever, but just to help them begin to process it. And writing focuses the mind and helps slow it down. Others, they need to talk to somebody who's objective, who can help them see it from different perspectives. That has a very grounding effect on them. So, grounding, de-escalate, so important. Toughest tools to learn because of the cortisol, anger, fuel, but some of the most important to learn if you're going to do well in recovery. Second thing that I would say, and this is mindfulness, and that's becoming aware of your anger patterns. So you can see in the diagram, there's a trigger, something triggers you, triggers your anger, and then that affects 4 different things. It affects you physically. You have physical symptoms when you're angry. It affects how you think. It affects other emotions, and it affects your actions. I'm not going to go into that. They're in another series if you want to watch it. But become aware of your anger patterns. So let me just give you the triggers thing to think about. Most of us have hundreds of things that trigger anger. It can be what a person says or does. It can be an event. But again, it's touching an old wound. So for many from complex trauma, you go back to the things that violate love are their strongest triggers. Anything that's injustice. Anybody lies to me, anybody disrespects me, anybody cheats on me, massive explosion takes place. Because those are your deepest wounds. And so it's a good anger, But now it just is over the top because you've never been able to resolve it in a healthy way. But those are big triggers. Then, for many, teasing, because that's a disrespect thing. It's a shame-based thing. Being bullied or watching others being bullied. Embarrassment. Being around immature people that are just stupid. People who just don't get it. Self-righteous hypocrites. People who don't respect your boundaries or other people's boundaries. People who are just so in their own little world, they're insensitive to your needs. Look for your shame and your guilt. Those are huge triggers of anger. Look for anything that feels like rejection or abandonment or neglect. Those are huge triggers. Next thing around mindfulness, so you get your patterns, but then an inventory every day of your anger. So we did this with fear, but now it's every day. Scale of 1 to 10. Where am I at in my anger? And so you can stop, slow down, get really quiet, feel in your body. Many will feel anger in certain parts of their body. What am I feeling? Where's my anger at? Do that regularly, because what happens if you've only been aware of your anger when it hits a 10 out of 10 is that often you got 4, 5, 6 anger and you're not even aware of it. But it's building to a 10 and it's going to explode soon if you don't catch it. So the sooner you can catch it, the better. Then you can become aware of it. So become aware of your early warning signs. So that might be you just are more irritable, you're more impatient, you don't want to be around people, you find yourself more critical, finding fault with others, you want to isolate. What are your early warning signs that anger is building? And be aware that there's probably certain times of the day that you're more prone to anger than other times of the day. So we talk about being hangry, you're hungry. We're more prone to anger. You're late in the day, you're tired, you're exhausted. Or you just get home from work and you're frustrated from work and you just want some space. Those are times when you are prone to anger. And then be aware that for most of us, there's this line of no return. You're building 4, 5, 6, 7. Once you get to 7, you're going to be at a 10 in no time. You can't stop it now. And so you need to become aware of where that line is, where you got to start to learn how to stop it before it crosses that line. So that takes us to the next part of mindfulness. You go, my anger's at a 6 today. This isn't good. So I got that part of mindfulness. Now you go to the second part. What's causing it? What's going on here? Why am I so irritable? Okay, maybe I'm overtired. Maybe I'm depressed. Maybe I haven't connected with anybody lately and I'm actually been too much on my own. Or maybe I've been smothered by people. I haven't had enough alone time. Have my feelings been hurt? Stop and look at that. And so for most people, they got to get some time alone when they realize my anger is building. And they're trying to figure out what's going on here. And then once they figure it out and they go, I'm really stressed, I'm overtired. Okay, now what do I got to do about it? Well, I got to have to set some boundaries. I got to go to bed earlier. I'm going to have to maybe say no more often to people. And then part of dealing with anger to me is when I get up in the morning, I got to get myself not just aware of my anger, but if I see that there's anger building, then I got a plan to reduce the stuff that's causing anger, but then I got to go, okay, I got to get into a good headspace today. Because right now it's mainly negative and it's angry. I got to get to a place where it's characterized mainly by love, mainly by a willingness and a desire to be warm and to be open and to connect with other people. What do I got to do to get there? I need time to meditate. I need time to kind of surrender to what is healthy. And then what do I change? What do I accept because I can't change it? That's all got to be figured out as I deal with anger. So I would say that anger is one of the most important things to understand, one of the most difficult things to change positively, and it takes a long time to change it because it's it's the most powerful of all the emotions, but it is the most damaging of all the emotions. And so I just hope this gives you some help today. Hope it gives you some practical tools. Again, you can get more tools by watching the rest of the videos in the series on anger on YouTube. But that's all for part 1.